I'm going to start off with Ticket to Heaven by Shirley. I never really wanted to go to heaven. I knew someone would make me. There was pressure on me to go there, to heaven. Starting the morning I met Putchik. "Barry," Gannick said when I dragged myself into his office. "Meet Frank Putchik, director of Club Eden." "Hey," I said, "how you doing?" I smiled woodenly, shook Putchik's hand mechanically. You have to understand that it was 3:30. I've been in the office since 9, this not being one of your breezy, we're all chums advertising agency where the idea men are permitted to be prima donnas. I'd spent the morning thinking of ways to convince the public it needs Triple M brand hamburger enhancer. Of course, we'd end up explaining to the world that the 3 M's would stand for as in good. Any jackass could come up with the same thing, and Triple M could have saved a bundle on an advertising agency. But agencies like mine thrive on the bad habits of industry. I spent lunch flattering Jenny Sorgensen from Mapplethorpe and Sorgensen in the hopes that she'd offer me a job at a better salary and maybe residuals. I spent the first part of the afternoon thinking of ways to convince the public it needed a certain artificial sweetener, one only mildly carcinogenic. And by 3 o'clock, after a hard day of constructing artful lies and fighting the tides of self-disgust, I was burnt, looking at the world through glazed eyes. By 3:15, everything in the office was flat and two-dimensional, threatening to fold down into 1D. By 3:30, some mysterious temporal voodoo arrests the clock. The pace of time becomes a hunchbacked old lady with an aluminum walker. And that's when Gannick called me in to meet Putchik. Putchik was a middle-aged guy with a smallish head, chipmunk cheeks, and a seemingly infinite wealth of smile lines around his mouth and eyes. He smiled a lot, mostly with his mouth slightly open, looking goofy with his overbite. He was tall, round-shouldered, wore dandruff-flecked wire rims. He had a nice blue and dove-gray Pierce Hayakawa designer suit and immaculate patent-leather shoes. I didn't notice all this at first, only a spongy handshake and a sort of Putchik-shaped blur. It could have been part of the furniture. Gannick, my boss, was sitting behind his desk in shirt sleeves on a special chair to make him less midgety-ish, his high forehead a little less furrowed than usual, his small shoulders almost relaxed, his darting black eyes for once relatively stationary. Gannick was happy about something. Putchik must represent a juicy account. I screwed my smile down into something faint but superficially warm and sat across from Putchik where I could look out the window at the chill, brittle spires of Manhattan's petrified forest. Petrified, I thought. Me too. "Coffee, Barry?" Gannick asked me. "No, thanks." "He doesn't need coffee," Gannick said, pretend confiding to Putchik, "or any other stimulant. Barry Thorpe runs on adrenaline." He grinned to soften the sarcasm. I must have looked more wooden than I thought. Putchik tried to get the joke and blinked at the two of us. "Oh, ha ha ha," Gannick said. "Barry, Club Eden's Paradise Vacations is our new account. Guess you've heard rumors." Hadn't heard a word. "And it's something a little, well, unusual. Since you, Barry, are a little, well, unusual." He paused for everyone to chuckle, so we did. "Thought you ought to head this up." He beamed, and I tried to look pleased. It was as if the strings operating the muscles of my face were stretched out, threadbare, because I couldn't quite manage the expression I wanted. "You okay, Barry?" Gannick asked. "Just tired." I summoned a little focus, a little animation. "Well, have we got a prospectus or a press kit or a video?" "Video of," Putchik asked. "The resorts, or there aren't any resorts." Putchik brought his hands together as if he'd clapped them and then did a sort of joyful ringing instead, shifting on his chair and said a little impishly, "Club Eden doesn't send people to anywhere on this planet, Barry." It was my turn to blink in confusion. More of the room jumped into sharp focus. They had my attention. I turned to Gannick. "Correct me if I'm wrong. I know I'm a little out of it at times, but did I lose 20 or 30 years somewhere? Are we in the next century, all of a sudden? Last I knew, it was just 2016. I'm sure of it. Interplanetary travel is still unmanned, right?" "It's a manner of speaking. We're not sending people to another planet per se," Putchik explained. "We're sending them to another existential focal point, another plane, to use the metaphysical jargon. We send them to heaven." I looked at Putchik and then at Gannick. "Heaven. Some kind of sense-around laser show, huh?" 360-degree screens, incense. Ganek said, nope. They put you in a machine, and you really feel physically like you've gone someplace. Sort of mind trip through, I guess, some kind of electronic stimulation of the brain, or he shot a glance of polite inquiry at Putchik. Putchik hemmed, getting ready to haw. If you like, you can look at it like that. He glanced up at me. It'd really help if you went there, yourself. Then you'd accept it. He looked embarrassed, stared at his reflection in his shoes. His mouth was shut, as much as it would shut with his overbite. All of a sudden, he worried me. The next day was Saturday. Under the business incentive labor laws, most of the population had to work on Saturday, but not me. I could putter around my weekend house with a drink in my hand. Getting gloomier as I got drunker, opaquing the windows and dialing the lights low, enjoying the gloom, hugging the house's darkness. Thinking about the Club Eden demonstration I was supposed to go to on Monday. We send them to heaven, Putchik had said. Neurological heaven, I supposed. Some pleasure-inducing machine, perhaps. Heaven at Putchik's prices was something only a few could afford. I shrugged. What else was new? I went to the picture window, thumbed the button, and the window glass rippled into transparency. The spring afternoon was startling, almost tastelessly garish after the artificial twilight of my house. I blinked in the unwanted sunshine, and the whiskey made my head ache. Tumbler in hand, I looked out over Hartford's prettiest suburbs. Trees lined the streets with newly budded clouds of soft green. Here and there were the bright pom-poms of flowering fruit trees. I realized I had no idea exactly what kind of trees most of them were. I'd lived here for 5 years. I didn't know what kind of trees were on the street, or my neighbor's first name. But I knew my neighbor was security passed. We were all security passed in Connecticut Village. When you drove in, you showed the checkpoint guard your residency card or gave a visitor's number. Get a residency card to be passed. You had to have a B3 credit rating, of course no record as a felon. It was a closed community, not internally gregarious. The fragmentation of true community feeling extended its anti-roots even here, where all looked cozy. We had television, we had interactive video and shopping networks, we had the net. We had our lifestyles. We'd shrugged off the responsibility that acknowledging strangers brings. Because one stranger leads to another, not very far beyond the checkpoint was the crumbling border of Hartford's shack town, swollen with strangers we didn't want to meet and tried not to think about. I wasn't always the model resident of Connecticut Village. I'd written some stuff for the Reformist before I'd gotten scared into money hunting, before Ganek found me. What I'd written was pretty self-righteous, foolishly idealistic stuff, like every town has its shack town, squatter enclaves grown up in the cracks between the neat little high-security urban village units the cities have become, the refuge of legions of homeless, disenfranchised of every profession, those who worked in industry and oil before hands-on industry became an overseas venture and oil became an obsolete energy source, those who worked in construction before the contractors went to 75%, pre-molded structures and robotics, those without white-collar work skills, or those who'd failed to fit in with the country's biggest employer, the service industry, that great consumer supply mechanism, so like a chicken feeding machine on a poultry ranch. The shack towns are tenanted by people who, a decade or two ago, built the affluence that the privileged feed off of now. Jobless minorities are in shack towns, of course, and the old. Since the demographic shifts of the late 90s and the growth of geriatric medicine, the old have become a huge moldering slice of the population, and millions of them went discarded, forgotten, cold-shouldered by the post-welfare society, the fresh, new, shiny world where entrepreneurs are messiahs, where those who failed to earn are cast into the outer darkness beyond the borders of the profit margin. Stuff like that. Foolish stuff. The generalization of college journalism. Anyway, why go on about it when the response is always the same? They'll say, so what? And if the residency committees knew I'd written that stuff for the Reformist, I'd never been security passed for Connecticut Village. Sometimes I passed Shacktown on the freeway, just sort of a smudged gray tumble of shanties glimpsed through the hurricane fence. From inside a microchip-driven car, whistling smoothly down the freeway, the poor were reduced to a blur of embarrassment. The whole world became a visual shrug at 110 miles an hour. I knew there was bribery in it somewhere. I knew it when Gannick said the FDA has given Club Eden full approval. The Patent Bureau, everyone, they're lining up to give their blessing. It was the way he said it, quick, with an undertone that warned me not to harp on the subject, so I didn't ask why there hadn't been any newspaper talk about it yet. Obviously, they'd worked hard to keep it mum till federal approval was a fait accompli. Wouldn't want any nosy Senate subcommittees to delay approval. It was Monday afternoon. We were in what was to be the Club Eden showroom. Me, Gannick, Putchick, and Putchick's secretary Buffy. She was a sort of human happy face who went by Buffy with no outward evidence of shame. The showroom had been the front office of a large travel agency. The posters and brochure racks and desks and the fat middle-aged ladies with the snail-shell hairdos had been cleared out. Now there were only the transport rig, like a hump of frozen milk under the fluorescent lights in one corner of the room, and some paint jigsawed newspapers around the freshly rollered walls. I looked at the transport rig and told myself, take it easy. It's probably harmless. It looked harmless. It looked like one of those little imitation race car seats you get into at an arcade. Except on the outside, it was all designer stylized. A sculptured teardrop of imitation mother of pearl. The little door was open. Inside there was a chair and a few dials on a dashboard. No controls, nothing else. I asked, no helmet? Something to wire into the brain to create the illusion? Or do you just inject them with something? And I had to cough. Recent coat of freshly applied blue paint suffused that shuttered room with quivery fumes. Putchick cleared his throat. No, no other fixtures are necessary. It's mostly automatic. Buffy, as might be expected, was short, pert, faintly plump, auburn-haired, and dimple-cheeked. She had silver-flecked china blue eyes and stubby, pudgy white fingers awkwardly extended by 3-inch nails. Blue nails with white glitter. She wore a puce jumpsuit, which was her version of a test pilot's get-up. I'm all ready, she told Gannick a trifle too eagerly. Her voice was breathy and maddeningly affected. Have you done this before, Buffy? I asked. Oh, sure, she lilted. We had a kind of test pilot guy. Before that, monkeys and pigeons. They're still using pigeons, Gannick whispered to me as she turned and climbed into the machine. She closed the door behind her. The rig started to hum. Putchick tilted his head back as if listening to some beloved song. His dirty spectacles washed out in the light. One of our big selling points, Putchick said, is going to be a money-back guarantee. Gannick's eyebrows shot up. Money-back guarantee? That's a big risk, Frank. I mean, everyone I've met who's tried it is enthused, but there are all kinds of people out there. Brain chemistries, metabolisms, there's no two exactly alike. There's even 20% who don't like the experience. I can't go into all the details, Putchick said, looking at himself in his shoes again, hands in his pocket. Let's just say we are 99% confident that virtually everyone will like it. There's some risk, but it's worth it. The rig's humming had risen in pitch, and I winced as it passed out of the audible range. I felt a ripple go through me, a tightness in my chest, pinching at the back of my throat. For the briefest of moments, I had a peculiar feeling that Buffy was all around me. It was cloying, believe me. Then the room was normal again. Putchick glanced at the rig. Should be out in, 5 minutes, vacation complete. I looked at him. What's the list price on this? Once we get rolling, $5,000 per vacation. Won't be selling the machines at all, for at least a decade. And it's a gimmick, so anyone who tries breaking into one to see its works will only find a glob of smoking slag inside. $5,000, I stared at him. 1,000 bills a minute? I could feel Gannick staring at me. Don't offend the client, the glare was telling me. Putchick was unruffled. Only objectively, it doesn't feel like 5 minutes to them. They think it's months. Depends on how subjective their personalities are. It'll feel like at least a month has passed. For some it may feel like an eternity. Of pure, uninterrupted happiness. He looked at me as if to say, what do you say to that? His head tilted back, his open mouth aimed at me. If I'd looked, I could have checked out his tonsils. One of Putchick's technicians came in. He was a blond kid with a samurai haircut. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit. Club Eden, ornately stitched onto each shoulder. He sang quietly along with something I heard only as a seashell sound leaking from his earphones. He carried a small box of microchips to the rig, snaking his head to the music. Putchik glanced at him in irritation. "Chucky, it's not the rig that needs the guidance chips, it's the other one." But Chucky didn't hear him. He opened the door of the rig. It was empty. Gannick put the scotch down in front of me and said, "Drink it," like a doctor's command. We were in Putchik's office, and I was in Putchik's chair. He was standing solicitously over me, making a motion with his hands like a fly cleaning its foreclaws. On the other side of the desk, Gannick was glowering. His expression said, "You're making a great impression on the client, just great." The girl was gone. "I'll be okay," I said. "I just felt funny for a second." I looked at Putchik and then rolled the chair back so he wasn't breathing on me. "Some kind of stage magic cabinet?" He shook his head. "She's gone. Projected. Sliding between planes. We were going to let people believe it was all in the head for a while. We thought they'd be too scared otherwise. Believe me, My ears are burning," Buffy announced, giggling as she came into the room. She looked flushed, happy as a 3-year-old with a mouthful of chocolate. "I'm okay," she said. "I've been to heaven." Sometimes, alone at home, I look at my free pass and try to talk myself into taking the trip to heaven. Gannick wanted me to take it for promotional inspiration. Everyone else wanted to take it. All 3 of my ex-wives had called, asking me to get them passes. Tickets to heaven. Just as if they hadn't called me subhuman, cold-blooded, the other things I can't go into without my stomach knotting up. Betty and Tracy cooing at me, posing as affectionate little sisters. But Celia, of course, said, "You owe me this and more, you bastard." I didn't go to heaven myself. Not for a long time. I told myself it was because of Winslow. But no, Winslow was just an excuse. He was a good excuse, because Winslow is scary. I met him 6 months after Buffy vanished and came back. It was Friday night. I was in my weekday's apartment, packing to go out to my place in Connecticut. It was a time when I least brook interruptions. So when the doorbell rang and I opened the hall door, I snarled, "Yeah, what?" Then he flashed the holo. He flipped open his wallet, and the 3D Federal Eagle spread its wings in the wallet, and across its breast was the luminous banner, "Jeffrey C. Winslow, Special Agent, Food and Drug Administration." "Mr. Barry Thorpe?" Useless to deny it, right? Winslow didn't crack a smile. He was black-suited with a fashionable bureaucrat's triple-tongue necktie, and he was an albino. An apparition. The ghost of bureaucracy passed, I thought, carrying an Illumitech briefcase instead of a ball and chain. He looked at me with an expression stark as a no trespassing sign. "I'm doing a series of interviews, Mr. Thorpe, to follow up on our temporary approval of Club Eden. May I come in?" He looked at me with an expression stark as a no trespassing sign. "You got the wrong guy. I'm just the barker. I don't own the carny. You want to talk to Putchik? Maybe Gannick." "I've talked to them. I'll be talking to them again." He waited. "The FDA is responsible for more than food and drugs. Club Eden used a machine that affected people physically, hence it was under their jurisdiction. And hence Winslow." Resignedly I said, "Come on in." He was all questions, no accusations, and the questions seemed routine. "When you interview a returned vacationer for an endorsement, are they paid for the interview?" Things he already knew the answer to. He slung this one at me underhand. "Are you aware of any sums paid by Mr. Putchik or Mr. Gannick or their representatives to agents or functionaries of the FDA?" I thought, no, they don't tell anyone but the guy they're bribing. All I said was, "No." "Thanks very much." He stood up and gave me a limp handshake. "That'll do for this time," and he left. This time? I went out to a bar, found a payphone, and called Gannick. "It's nothing," he told me. "There's a little bureaucratic power struggle at the FDA. This guy Winslow works for the guys trying to pull off the coup. You want to prove wrongdoing on the part of the FDA commissioners, take over their jobs. But they got nothing. Did he ask about the charred pad effect? Corporeal side effects?" "No. What side effects are those?" "Gannick, I'm supposed to get the straight scoop on this stuff when I... Hey, we're not holding out on you. Nothing important. Don't worry about it. It's all bullshit. Hey, I got a steak burning. I gotta go. Listen, Barry, just head out to Connecticut and forget it." I knew Gannick's "don't ask questions if you love your paycheck" tone, so I hung up and tried to forget about Winslow. God knows it sounded good when people described it. I was in my office brainstorming a new 15-second spot for the Federal Broadcasting Agency's latest primetime hit, Yoshio Smith, Assassin for the CIA. Club Eden was a major sponsor for the show. I was watching a video of the writer Alejandro Buckner talking about his first Club Eden vacation. He was beaming, still in afterglow. Buckner was round-faced, and normally he looked like a sadistic Cupid. Today he was positively cherubic. Heaven is not Christian, particularly. There is no biblical God in evidence, no angels precisely. The prefix of heaven perhaps fill the bill, but heaven will satisfy the Christian, the Buddhist, or the Hindu, anyone. Some people have claimed heaven looks different for everybody, but it isn't really so. It's got a landscape, definite topographical features. It just depends on which part you tend to get projected to, and that's decided by your personality. Some people are projected into the pastoral heaven, some of them into the urban one, many into the one that's sort of idealized suburb. Me, I'm an unabashed urban heaven man. Well, it was a series of rooftop gardens, sort of hanging Garden of Babylon variation of the great penthouses of Manhattan. But of course in heaven there are no pigeon droppings, there's no smog, no acid rain, there are no thudding helicopters, screaming jets. You might see some aerial gliders, impossibly graceful. Everything has a sort of nimbus, like when you do certain drugs. When you look close, you see it's just the shine off that thing's perfection, the natural glow of its excellence. You don't get tired in heaven. Sometimes you sleep. Somehow, just when the people around you want to sleep. There are no mosquitoes, no venomous things, no maggots, no defecation, no halitosis. There's sex in heaven, however you like it. It's more like dancing. Somehow it loses all its earthly clumsiness. It never becomes excessive, even though the orgasms are slow, full, and not enervating. Food exudes from the tables as you need it, but you never fall into gluttony. You cannot break your bones, you cannot fall ill. Nothing dies. Everything is easy, but nothing is dull. There are no conversational dullards, no faux pas or awkward silences. There are sharp smells and soft smells, but no bad smells. I say again that heaven is not in the least dull. There are storms and there is snow, only when everyone's in the mood. There is contention there, but never acrimony. All contention is glorious sport in heaven. It can't be that perfect, I thought. I didn't want it to be. Perfection is suspicious, is improbable. I wanted heaven to be real. So I was relieved when he said, you can't do just anything you want there. If you want to interrogate the other entities, they look like people, but then again they don't. They're all sort of soft-edged and shimmery. Anyway, if you want to ask awkward questions about the place, then you brought a lot of inappropriate psychodynamics with you, as one of the prefects said to me. You brought neurotic attachments, all inappropriate in heaven. So the prefects, they look like firefly glows without the fireflies, and much larger. They swarm up to you and sort of smooth you out, and then you forget all your pushiness, your capacity for violence, and your questions. Your questions are answered only with a sort of impression. The place is indeed something you're supposed to have earned. It's a higher state of communion with the universe, and that should be enough for you. There's something else kind of funny about the place. I leaned forward, sharply attentive. Buckner said, the entities who are there all the time, who are native to it, well, they look at you like, they don't really snub you or anything. There's nothing unfriendly. Just there's a sort of benevolent surprise, as if they sense that you don't belong there. The tape ended there. Gannick's interviewer hadn't liked the direction Buckner was taking, and we had enough good review from him anyway. The video ended, and the regular transmission on the TV monitor came on. I started to switch it off, but found myself watching. It was a news bulletin. 4 tenements had collapsed an hour earlier in the Bronx. About 270 people were feared injured or dead. Portions of the buildings just seemed to crumble into dust. The housing commissioner was quoted as saying, something similar happened about 2 weeks ago in Chicago, also a low-rent area. We think it's a result of termite damage or acid rain damage to these old buildings. Insects or acid rain or both. Oh, an explanation. It felt good to have an explanation for something like that, even one that felt wrong when you really thought about it. So don't think about it, I told myself. The phone rang. It was Winslow. I didn't put him on screen. Didn't want to see the white face and the black suit. Mr. Thorpe, he said, I just want you to know that if you want to tell me anything at all, I will see to it that it will be safe for you. with respect to prosecution. You with the FDA, not the FBI, Winslow. You seem to get them mixed up. Let's just say that this investigation is a little special. If you can tell me about the corporeal side effects, report on the Club Eden phenomenon. I really don't know what you're talking about, I said sincerely. If you want to play that game, fine. We'll see who wins. FDA, Winslow, FDA. The other one is the Federal Bureau of... He hung up. I shrugged. Then I thought, either he's a loon, or we're in trouble and we don't know it. Don't think about it. It's Gannick's problem. I went home. I sat in my confoam chair, nestling into its artificial hug, with the windows opaqued and the lights dimmed, playing my hiding game, pretending it was nighttime and dark out. In a way, it was dark in. I sat there, sipping Johnny Walker and listening to the TV talk about vacationing in heaven. I thought, I don't like this life. I don't like this world. So why don't I go? The special report anchorman talked about the Club Eden phenomenon, described the depression and ennui Club Eden returnees slipped into when the afterglow wore off, noted that there was no actual physical addiction, but there was an indication of compulsiveness. After you get over the depression, a returnee told the camera, you get back into the groove of regular life. Everything seems kind of dingy and dirty and tired and stiff for a while. Pretty soon you start enjoying life again, and you stop yearning for heaven all the time. As soon as you got the money again, man, you sign up. Certain psychiatrists, whom I knew to be in the pay of Club Eden, made great soft-edged, rolling claims for the therapeutic benefit of a Club Eden vacation. A few Southern senators muttered darkly about the religious implications. Club Eden had stopped calling the projection plane heaven. That's what everyone thought it was. So the moral majority stamped their feet and pouted. Senator Wexler called for an investigation into the risks, stating it was only a matter of time before the transport rig went haywire, projected someone into a mountain or the ocean or maybe into hell. If that didn't happen, there was a danger someone might develop bootleg transport rigs. Club Eden had resisted franchising, held on to the monopoly with all the legal strength that the $400 million they'd made could give them. That was a lot of strength. After the special report, I had my third scotch, listened to the regular newscaster dolefully announce that yes, the government had admitted that the country was sliding into a severe recession. Yes, there was a rather unexpected oil shortage, general energy crunch, epidemic problems with power plant generators around the country, indeed around the world, and the shack towns were growing. I rewound the cassette so I could listen to Buckner again and take notes. Club Eden was hot. Club Eden was the buzz. There was suspicion, outrage, and investigations. Club Eden kept on through it all, and Gannick and I did our work. Don't take paradise for granted until you've tried Club Eden. And so you think this, a slick Kodachrome photo of glorious South Pacific beach, deep blue sky, crystal water, emblematically perfect palm trees, is paradise? You haven't tried Club Eden, and Club Eden, who needs drugs? I had my free pass locked up at home. Gannick encouraged me to go. Putchik encouraged me. Putchik went himself sometimes. There's a limit to how often you could go, how long you could stay, something to do with electromagnetic stress on the body. Putchik went as often as the safety regimen would allow. Gannick didn't go. He said poker at the club and a pretty girl bringing the dry martinis was heaven enough for him. But I want you to go, he said. Okay, Barry? So I sat in my apartment on a Saturday evening, the year after Buffy had vanished and came back, thinking about using my pass. Not worrying about Winslow. He'd come only once more, and it had been more of the same. I'd almost forgotten about him. The shack-towners couldn't afford a ticket to heaven. I had one, so why didn't I use it? I went to the safe, I kept the pass in, and opened it. I looked at the pass. I couldn't quite... That's when the doorbell rang, and somehow I knew it would be Winslow. Guiltily, I locked the pass away and opened the door for him and stared. He looked different now. The veneer was gone. So was the badge and the Illumitech briefcase. He wore a cheap print-out paper suit and dark glasses. The left lens on the dark glasses was cracked. Smelled like beer, he listed to the right. I was seeing a different Winslow here, and I liked him better. Got to talk to you, Winslow said. Come on in and have a drink, I said, as if you needed one. He reached into a pocket and took a gun from it. It was small, a .25. Put a hole right through me at this range. No, you come out. We're going for a drive. We were walking along a pitted gravel road under a lowering gray sky. The clouds at the horizon were reddening in sunset and beginning to shed rain. The red tint, it looked as if the clouds were bleeding. We walked between the shanties of Shacktown. There's smells that would have stopped me like a brick wall if the gun hadn't been in Winslow's coat pocket. Winslow was talking, with sort of excessive care that only underlined his drunkenness. Mr. Danville, my supervisor, and I received a sort of anonymous tip, a transcription from a conversation between two lawyers, one for a certain Janet Rivera and the other working for Club Eden. Club Eden was offering Janet Rivera a fat settlement, $1 million new bucks. She took the money and ran. Seems with a very minor adjustment of the transport rig or a power surge at the wrong time, the vacationer will arrive in something very like hell. Perhaps it's like this. He gestured vaguely at the packed-in, mud-encrusted, sewage-reeking shanties. The drawn faces peering from beneath plastic sheets nailed over crooked doorways. He went on. Perhaps it's worse. Ms. Rivera was sent to such a hell. Apparently, Miss Rivera barely kept her sanity. Watch out, that dog wants a piece of your thigh. He's wild. It was a bony yellow mongrel, its eyes cloudy, its muzzle ribbed with a snarl. Winslow took the gun from his pocket and said, "This'll feed some of these kids." The gun cracked, making me jump as he shot the dog in the head. Its legs buckled and it fell twitching. An old woman, muttering to herself, scurried out and dragged the dead dog by the tail into her hut. The transcript got us interested, Winslow went on as we continued down the road. I glanced over his shoulder and saw a small crowd following us at a careful distance, a convention of scarecrows. And we saw our chance to pull down the commissioners. They were corrupt. We'd had enough. We probed, came up with something we didn't expect. A correspondence between the increase in Club Eden vacationers and the statistical deterioration of the living conditions of people around them. Putchik knew about it. It was called launchpad charring, because they likened the trips to heaven to the launching of rocket ships, and the launch pads are charred by rocket ship engines. Thorpe. Club Eden's launch pad is our world. Its charring is the side effects in the world. The worsening recession, the widening gap between rich and poor. And it went on. The exchange became more literal. Look, Thorpe. He gestured at something. We come to a pit in the earth. It's about 400 yards across, deeper than I could see, coated with fine gray-black dust. The shanties were built right up to its rim. Those nearest it were half fallen, partly sunk in soft ashen ground. Thick, oily drops of rain pattered down, freckling the gravel and drumming tin rooftops, drum-rolling faster and faster as the downpour increased. Under its impact, 3 of the shacks around the rim of the crater collapsed at once, buckling like a shot dog, crumbling like sandcastles under a wave. I heard human voices crying out from the shambles, a dissonant choir, wailing, glimpsed faces in the muddy ash, faces stamped with resignation, swallowed up a moment later. There are lots more like these, Thorpe, all over the world. They sprang up after Club Eden got really big. Thousands of people have gone into these pits. They're all caught up in some kind of inertia, despair, so they don't fight it. You can feel the pit pulling at you. He was right. I felt the pit tugging at me, sort of vacuum sucking at my sense of self-worth, my need to survive, pulling me apart, making me want to take a step forward to pitch myself in. There's a federal cover-up of all this, Winslow was saying. Shut up, I said. I wrenched my gaze from the pit. The urge to throw myself in it almost overwhelmed me. I couldn't stand it there anymore. Shoot me or not, I said, I'm leaving. I turned and started walking back the way we'd come. I waited for the gunshot. After a moment, he was walking beside me, hunched against the rain. Once he had to fly her into the air to disperse the crowd. In 20 minutes, we were in his car. Perhaps what happened to me in Danville is part of the pattern of effects that hits anyone who doesn't visit heaven, Winslow said. Perhaps it'll hit you eventually. We sat in his car listening to the rain hammer on the roof. He took off his sunglasses and focused his pink eyes on nothing at all. We were fired. They said we'd gone beyond the confines of our job, which we had. We'd made things up. We hadn't. He tugged idly at a sleeve of his paper suit. The acid rain had worked on it, and the sleeve came away in his fingers. I've run out of money. My clothes are rotting on my back. What matters, what should have mattered, he looked at me, are those people out there. I didn't say anything. I was choking on what I had seen. He said, "Why didn't you take the trip?" Just a feeling. It was going too far and pretending that everything was all right. It was going too far to wallow in our private heaven when there are so many people in hell. It was always wrong. This way I couldn't look away somehow. I was just a step too far. Guilt, I guess, is what it boils down to. You had the right instincts, Thorpe. I knew it when I interviewed you. I could tell the whole thing bothered you. I did my homework on you. Read those pieces you wrote a few years back. I know you're not happy about what you do for Gannick, persuading people to squander millions on the pointless consumption of crap. It bothers you. You were addicted to the money. Mostly I was just scared, not having an income big enough to save up a safety margin. I was scared of ending up like those people, so I had to do it. No, you didn't. You don't. You saw what it led to, so Thorpe, what are you going to do about it? I don't have any proof of bribery or anything else. Let me tell you something, the public doesn't want this thing to go sour. They don't want it questioned or fought. They want heaven, and damn the consequences. And they're paying into a lot of senatorial campaigns to see that their chances of heaven aren't disturbed. I can't do a goddamn thing. You're wrong, Thorpe. What you can do is precisely a goddamned thing. I knew what he wanted me to do. No reason I should do it. I could get away. I could escape this. I could begin going to heaven myself. I couldn't. I saw the faces whose expressions had gone to dust. I felt the suction of the entropy pit. Having seen that, I was transformed by knowledge. I'd lost my moral innocence, and knowing it, I couldn't turn my back on it. What do you want me to do? It starts with a trip to heaven. It's going to be hard, Winslow had said. Maybe the hardest thing you've ever done. It was. It was like someone who loves puppies being forced to throttle one. It was like seeing your mother for the first time in 10 years and then, though you love her, having to spit in her eye at the moment of reunion. It was like being in heaven and spurning it. The vista was soft, sweet, warm, like living in an impressionist landscape, like great impressionism, never dull. I was nude but unashamed. For the first time I felt nudity without awkwardness. I was drifting weightless over the treetops, basking in just the right amount of sunshine, feeling the caress of the music they gave off, and reveling in the surge of joy that was arrival. The sight of friends I had never known before, awaiting me in the garden, turning with a luminous gladness in their faces. I wrenched myself away and began to seek. The act brought the prefects of heaven. They emanated from the trees like a thought from a synapse, spiraled gracefully around me, soft lights, living questions. They drew closer to assuage the misplaced desire in me. With a crackle of lightning that was an expression of will, I thrust them back, refused to let them soothe me into heaven. What then, they asked. Without speaking, I asked them, how is it we're permitted here at all? For surely this place was something to be earned. You're permitted here because you've come here. The great organizer has made this place. The great organizer is the living principle who creates all orderliness and harmony. You are here in absolute harmony, so the organizer must intend it. I told them what had happened on our world to the poor, how things had worsened. I asked them why it had happened. There are laws regarding the conservation of matter and energy. If you fill a cup from the bottle will be that much emptier. Your world is the bottle. Your privileged are emptying it out. The others must suffer. There are machines of metaphysical truth that underlie physical things. You have tampered with the machines. Your wealthy surround themselves with stolen grace, with the subatomic essence of orderliness, stolen from the exploited. This stolen grace prevents them from paying the price, so others must. This place, then, is no supernatural paradise. It is a function of law. All laws incorporating what you call physics, all laws of what you call science, and laws your people haven't learned. This place is a great device. Just as in your world, a church is a physical construct to represent the idea of holiness, here we use a physical construct to materialize holiness. Heaven is created by a machine. Yes, a machine birthed by the great machine that is the universe. Then tell me how I can make adjustments to right the imbalance in the machine, to arrest the deterioration on our end of things. The obvious, they said. This is from an interview with Frank Puchik at the security ward of Bellevue Hospital's mental health facility. For me, it began with a can opener. I saw a hand holding an old-fashioned can opener, kind you have to stab into the can. The hand was stabbing into my belly, opening it like a lid, sawing toward my groin. Through the pain I looked harder at the hand and saw it was my own. I could not say I had no control over it. I controlled the hand. I was making it cut me open. I was no masochist. I did not enjoy it. I screamed for it to stop, and I meant it. After a while the wound went away, but of course by then I was making another. Not wanting to, but doing it voluntarily. The paradox sneered at me. At the same time, I was watching the great screen where my humiliations and stupidities replayed. I knew my mother watched on another screen as I brought the favors of a small boy in Spanish Harlem. My sensation of humiliation and suffering and all their permutations were not diminished in the least by time or familiarity. None of it brought me relief or a sense of expiation. Later I found gasoline and tools and glass with dog shit on it. I used all those things too. It was imprinted on my mind when I came back from heaven. The prefect had imprinted the adjustments, the literal electronic adjustments, the equations for the new guidance ships to go into the transport rig. We went from one Club Eden transport station to another across the country, Winslow and I, wearing the Club Eden technicians' jumpsuits I'd stolen, pretending to be doing routine service checks, making adjustments. We set it up so our readjustments applied exclusively to the new 10-minute vacations, which were available only to the wealthiest vacationers, the industrial barons, their spoiled children, the corporate vampires, the corrupt politicians. And of course there was Puchik. We saw to that, because Winslow had spoken to Puchik, who had admitted he'd known early on about the side effects of granting first-class tourist passage to heaven. Puchik had known, and had not cared. Puchik was the first to go, the first of many. By degrees it began to work. The suffering of the exploited and the abandoned began to be reversed. Some of the garbage pits became gardens. The ash pits cleared up like the healing of geological cankers. The shack-towners found strength. They organized and built and made demands. There was no utopia there, and never will be. There was dignity. Soon there was food and shelter. We restored the balance. The adjustments worked. It worked because Club Eden had gotten sloppy about security, which meant we were able to send a surprisingly large number of people to hell. But then again, maybe that shouldn't have surprised us.